Hello. Good evening. Does this work? Yes. Good evening. Welcome to the, welcome to the welcome to the 14th presentation of the Civil Courage Prize. Tonight to one of the most eminent recipients, as you will hear. We gather to honor our recipients, but in this case, and some others, we are also honored by his presence, and I am deeply touched that Dr. Quegway could come here for this occasion. The Civil Courage Prize, as I think you know, is not like Wimbledon. It's not a ranking. It's just a wonderful exemplar of the virtue of civil courage, and there are many possible ones, but tonight's is one of the greatest. It's not like Wimbledon. It's just a elimination contest, so to speak. One of our problems is that we want to make sure that this fairly noisy prize it has now become doesn't complicate the life of the recipient. So we always check that it won't attract unfavorable attention from the authorities in his own country. Usually it is just the opposite. Usually it insulates him from troubles in his own country. But that we always try to establish. I'd like to express extreme gratitude to our nominators, because without whom we couldn't function. And to recognize tonight's nominator of Dr. McQuaggy, Nancy Camel. Thank you. At the end of all this, if you want, you can linger on and see more of the honoree or of the trustees or anybody else you want to talk to. We'll have a little gathering downstairs. It's different from our usual arrangement, so we'll have a little dinner downstairs for those who want to attend. Good. Where's John Menzies? There he is. John Menzies, who's more than once an ambassador and more than once a dean, will now give the introduction.
Thank you, John. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Bill Keller. From 1984 to the present day, he has served the New York Times as a writer, executive editor, and a leader throughout that period. The State Department has an axiomatic view that if something is happening in a foreign land but is not reported by diplomatic cable, it never happened. And I would say, similarly, the New York Times, as the nation's newspaper of record, determines which events are relevant to all of us. It defines what happens and reports on it. In this sense, because of this fact, it is important to have good people, superb practitioners such as Bill Keller, in positions of leadership. We have all benefited from Bill's talents. Mr. Keller received the Pulitzer Prize in 1989 for his reporting on the slow implosion of the Soviet Union. He told me before the event that that was the period of his life in which he takes greatest pride, and I can understand why. He was recognized by his peers for all that he did. But then, when he became executive editor, during his tenure at the Times, from July 2003 through September of 2011, he led the newsroom to an additional 18 Pulitzer Prizes. This is a monumental accomplishment, but it shows how important leadership by good people is to others. His visionary leadership also took the Times onto the internet, He helped create a digital subscription program to assure the company's future. Today, Mr. Keller is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times and writes for the New York Times Magazine. As chief of the Times Bureau in Johannesburg, South Africa from April 1992 through May 1995, he covered the transition from white rule to majority rule. In South Africa, as in Russia, Bill Keller is a witness to civil courage. Indeed, his own views challenge complacency on current events, from editorial policy to Iraq, to the National Security Agency, to policy on Syria. He stays at the forefront. Bill Keller, we are delighted to have you with us this evening and look forward to your address. Thank you for being such a leader in journalism. Thank you for being a part of this event. Will you join with me in welcoming Bill Keller, one of America's great journalists?
Ambassador Menzies clearly did not get the memo about lowering expectations. It's a privilege to share this evening with all of you, and a particular pleasure to become acquainted firsthand with the Train Foundation, which prior to this year's ceremony I've only known by reputation. As you might have guessed from Ambassador Menzies' introduction, the Train family and I share an affinity for Russia, tempered by a deep disenchantment with many of the men who've led that country. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who knew a few things about evil and resistance, is identified as the founding patron of this organization. As I'm sure you all know, John Train's daughter and a trustee of the foundation is Musa Klebnikov, whose husband, Paul Klebnikov, was murdered in Russia 9 years ago, apparently in retribution for his practice of investigative journalism. It occurs to me that it would not be hard to pick a civil courage winner every year from that great and sad country, though so far only the fearless Anna Politkovskaya has had that honor. She was a recipient in 2005, the year before she received the Russian equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting, which is a bullet to the head. My role tonight is not to talk at length about our honoree, but I want to point out that Denis Mukwege is no stranger to the New York Times. At least two of my good friends at the Times, Nick Kristof and Jeffrey Gettleman, have visited Dr. Mukwege at his hospital in Bukavu on more than one occasion and can testify to his remarkable accomplishments as a tireless surgeon, as the guiding spirit of one of Africa's most admirable medical ventures, and as a campaigner for the most elementary of human rights. Journalists are not as jaded as we pretend to be. When I told Jeffrey Gettleman, our East Africa correspondent, that I'd be speaking here tonight, he sent me the following message. Dr. Mukwege is very serious, committed, and a bit haunted by what he has seen, which is the vicious result of Congo's mayhem stumbling into his hospital on a daily basis. He's done life-saving operations on little girls and women who've been raped and butchered, only to have the same victims come trudging back in a few years later, raped again. I happened to be in Bukavu when he returned from exile this January after an assassination attempt, and thousands of people lined up along the busted roads to welcome him back, cheering out, "Le Docteur!" Some guys even printed posters of him and taped them to the windshields of their trucks. Congo is desperate for heroes, and Mukwege has become one, albeit a reluctant one. Well, Congo is not the only place in need of heroes these days. So before I go a little off message, I want to congratulate Dr. Mukwege for reminding us what compassion looks like when it's not just a sentiment, but a commitment. I also salute those in the audience who, through their generosity and effort, draw attention to brave figures like Dr. Mukwege so that others might be inspired to follow his example. Over the years, I've attended more than a few awards dinners, and I fully appreciate the value in celebrating champions of conscience. I also see a danger in these events. The danger is that some of us leave with a feeling of self-congratulation, of self-satisfaction. We bask in the heroism of brave individuals and feel that some of it has rubbed off on us, when what we ought to feel in the presence of a man like Dr. Mukwege is quite the opposite: discomfort, humility, even shame that by comparison we do so little. But by the time the wine has worn off and tonight's meal has been digested, we will have returned to our comfortable lives until the next awards dinner. I don't mean to be a scold, and I know some of you give generously of your time and money, and I'm certainly not proposing that we all sell our belongings, dress in sackcloth, and devote our lives to good works in dangerous places. But I'd like to use my few allotted minutes tonight to ponder how, beyond this nice gathering, we can best honor the service of someone like Dr. Mukwege. Perhaps we can start by contemplating what this award is meant to honor: steadfast resistance to evil at great personal risk. What do we mean by resistance, and what do we mean by evil? The homepage of the Train Foundation says, "We know it when we see it." I didn't find that line entirely convincing when the Supreme Court used it to describe obscenity, and I don't think that it quite amounts to enough said on the subject of evil. The first thing that I would say is that evil does not reside exclusively in those corners of the developing world where we tend to find the recipients of these prizes. It's true that Congo and Pakistan and Cuba and Zimbabwe, to cite a few of the places whose brave troublemakers have been feted at these dinners, have been afflicted with more than their share of brutality and oppression. And I suspect what some of us take away from events like this is gratitude that we live in a country comparatively prosperous and free. But evil is not always so stark or so remote. Is it not evil that in this most fortunate of countries, children go hungry, sick people go untreated, and lives can be stunted by prejudice? The particular evil that Dr. Mukwege combats is sexual violence used to subjugate women. But the Congo has no monopoly on that either. Look no farther than last Sunday's Times, where my colleague Nick Kristof describes harrowing cases of sex trafficking, not in some remote third world hell, but in Tennessee. And Solzhenitsyn would tell you that evil is even closer than Tennessee. "If only it were so simple," he wrote in the Gulag Archipelago. "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" By all means, we should be attentive to evil in all its manifestations and wherever it occurs, but the evil closer to home may be the evil most within our own power to resist. And what do we mean by resistance? I have profound admiration for the roster of Civil Courage Award recipients, individuals who have resisted by refusing to be silenced, refusing to be intimidated, by standing their ground. By my reckoning, half of those who have received this award since it was first bestowed in the year 2000 belong to my tribe, journalists who practice their truth-telling in countries where truth leads to imprisonment and torture. But resistance cannot depend entirely on individual heroes. There are simply not enough Denis Mukweges to resist all the evils at large in the world. Last week, the Nobel Committee surprised many people and disappointed some by failing to give its annual Peace Prize to a brave individual, in this case, a dauntless Pakistani schoolgirl who has become a global champion of education for girls. Instead, the Nobel for Peace went to a committee. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is a committee, and a committee is a faceless thing. It does not lend itself to colorful narrative or moving photo ops, and yet sometimes it takes a committee to effectively confront evil. And yes, sometimes resisting evil is the moral responsibility of states with armies. When the British intervened in Sierra Leone, or the French in Mali, or NATO in Bosnia, in each case with the purpose of stopping the slaughter of innocents, they were resisting evil. Of course, we should debate vigorously where such interventions are justified, why Mali and not Rwanda, why Bosnia and not Syria. But I hope you'll agree as a general proposition that facing evil sometimes requires more than individual courage and more than soft power. So far, the Civil Courage Award has gone exclusively to people whose struggles against injustice were nonviolent, and that's fine. But as another exemplar of civil courage like to say, The attacks of the wild beast cannot be averted with only bare hands. That was Nelson Mandela, who temporarily embraced armed struggle and abandoned it not as a matter of principle, but because in the South African context, it was not very effective. Just to be clear, I'm not proposing to rewrite the charter of the Civil Courage Prize, if there is a charter. I'm just pointing out that there are many species of evil and many legitimate means of resisting it. So I've been wondering, what can we do that would be a fitting tribute to Dr. Mukwege? And I have two answers, and neither of them is terribly profound. The first thing we can do is pay attention. I imagine pretty much everybody in this room follows the news, and asking me if that's a good thing is like asking a barber whether you need a haircut. But we live in a time of short attention spans, of faith-based politics, of ill-informed polemic, and celebrity distractions. I wrote recently that there's an isolationist mood in this country, and I meant not just the fatigue brought on by our long slogs in Afghanistan and Iraq. Aversion to war is a perfectly healthy instinct, but a broader reluctance to engage, to assert responsibility, to be bothered. Isolationism is more than war weariness, and more pernicious than that. It's a lack of confidence, an assumption that when we venture into the world, we'll probably get it wrong, we'll make it worse. It's amoral, insisting that what happens in the world is none of our business unless it threatens us directly. It's inward-looking and ungenerous. Especially in times like these, when so many people are inclined to pull back from the world, preoccupied with our own problems, it's more important than ever to stay informed, stay engaged, to speak up to our neighbors and our children, not just at awards banquets, but every day. Our patron Solzhenitsyn again. In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age. We are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Man spoke like a prophet. The second thing we can do is show up where we're needed. I'm sure many of you already do this, but if ever there was an occasion to say it, this dinner is that occasion. Put in a call to Habitat for Humanity and help build affordable housing. Go online to the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation website, where you'll find a long list of hospitals that would love to have a few hours of your time each week. It's not the same as treating rape victims, but it seems to me a rather splendid way to pay homage to Dr. Mukwege. Very few of us will ever be called upon to practice steadfast resistance to evil at great personal risk. But perhaps we can all manage occasional resistance to misfortune at a little personal inconvenience. To quote once more, not from Solzhenitsyn, but again from the Train Foundation website, if everyone says the devil take the hindmost, the devil soon works his way to the head of the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. If that's lowering expectations, then I'm in trouble here right now. I want to also, as John did, thank our nominator, Nancy Prager-Camel, who I have known for 20 years. And I'm always interested to hear her work with the Vital Voices Global Partnership, and welcome here. And thank you very much for bringing to our attention Dr. Mukwege. I have only known for just a day, but we have, as an organization and as a group of trustees, spent the last year spending a great deal of time reading about his many accomplishments, and more to the point, reading about his continuous struggle. I'm very honored to be here to introduce Dr. Mukwege today. He is the founder of the Panzi Hospital in Bukavu in Eastern Congo, and he is renowned, and I'm so pleased to say he is renowned throughout the world as a great doctor, treater of survivors of sexual violence, and an active denunciator of rape as a tool of war. Over his time, he has treated 30,000 women in his hospital, and this is in a country where over 16 years of violence, there have been something like 5 million killed and over 500,000 rapes in that country. His hospital has become a center and a magnet for women looking for treatment, looking for a future. He himself has been threatened and attacked and suffered assassination attempts. But he has stood up to be counted, and he is one man making an enormous difference, both in his own country and abroad. Clearly, he is a great inspiration, and undeniably, he is a man of great civil courage, and I have great pleasure in introducing Dr. Dennis Mukwege.
While we're arranging things, I should mention that we thought of honoring the South African hero that was recently described, Nelson Mandela, but Solzhenitsyn thought that was not a good idea, and he suggested, and we have always followed the principle that who we honor should be nonviolent. There are cases where nonviolence doesn't work, but you can do wonderful things with nonviolence. And incidentally, not only was Solzhenitsyn nonviolent, Gandhi was nonviolent, and Mandela did not engage in violence himself. He just briefly was part of an organization that did. Anyway, Dr. Mukwege, I hail you as winner of this year's Civil Courage Prize.
Honorable John Train, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for your invitation and for giving me the floor in this beautiful place. I want to express my sincere gratitude to the Train Foundation trustees for honoring me today with the Civil Courage Prize and for supporting the struggle against sexual violence. Honorable John Train, by funding the award for steadfast resistance to evil at great personal risk, has chosen to speak out for human dignity, to promote justice and peace, and to support the voice of the voiceless. During the past 15 years, the bodies of women of Congo have become the battlefield of the worst atrocities committed by armed groups. They have been largely ignored by the rest of the world. Meeting these women completely changed my life. My profession as a medical doctor led me to become a direct witness to a mass crime that is hard to fully understand. This is because sexual violence targets our most precious resource, our mothers, our wives, and doctors. Violence against women knows no social or cultural barriers. It includes harmful practices that range from rape to domestic violence to sexual harassment and abuses by teachers or employers. Rape is probably history's oldest and least condemned crime. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, rape as a strategy of war is even more destructive than military weapons. Sexual violence crimes have been committed in a widespread and systematic manner, not only to destroy a woman in her most intimate integrity, but also to tear apart her family and community. What is the ultimate origin of these atrocities? Not only tribal or national hatred, but also mercantile greed. The Congo produces minerals of the utmost interest of every modern economy. This includes tin, tungsten, and tantalum. The treaties, as are often called. Right now, in the pocket of many of you here tonight, and even mine, you have products made using these minerals. Your cell phone contains them. Strugglers over the metal in your cell phone, you have contributed to the loss of 5 million lives in my country and earn some $185 million a year for gangs who control access to the mine and collect bribes along the trade routes. This has devastating consequences on the economy, and it seriously impedes durable peace and sustainable development. Peace and justice and the rule of law will enable us, the Congolese people, to benefit from the natural resource that we have. The status quo is untenable. That is why I'm here tonight, to draw the attention of the international community to this human tragedy, to open your eyes and to urge all decision and policy makers to mobilize in order to put an end to rape as a weapon of war and to stand up for the dignity and empowerment of Congolese women. Action towards sustainable peace and accountability needs to be taken now. There is nothing inevitable about the situation. We can bring positive change to Congo. We can end the war and we can stop sexual violence. It is always a joy for me to see women who have endured the most serious crime begin to heal and to smile again after receiving holistic care at Ipanzi Hospital. There is a hope. There is a hope. Every day, we admire the fierce determination and the courage of Congolese women, notably the survivors of sexual violence in the Eastern Congo. They are the ones fueling hope and inspiring me, my own determination to continue to work in South Kivu. There is a path to a better future that addresses the root causes of the violence that plague the entire region. The full implementation of the Addis Ababa Framework Agreement for Peace, Security, and Cooperation for the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Great Lake region. We need the signatories of this agreement to fully comply with their commitments. And we need the international community to use all its influence and leverage to make this happen. We are counting also on the civil society to speak out to hold all the relevant government accountable. Addressing the root causes of the violence will ultimately allow the Congolese people to finally benefit from the dividend of peace and development. Everyone has the potential to make our humanity better. I believe it's a moral obligation to stand up for human rights and to work to heal the victims so that they become survivors and to support their empowerment worldwide. Allow me to dedicate this civil prize courage to my patient and all survivors of sexual violence. I will continue to speak out to denounce the unacceptable until the violence stops. We need to break silence and address the human tragedy. We must combat impunity and make peace. We need to struggle for human dignity and mutual respect among people and among nations. Honorable John Train, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, I convey my sincere gratitude to all of those present tonight and ready to help and engage in bringing the positive change that will allow the women of Congo to envisage a better future for their children. Together we can create change. Together we can end the violence. We can ensure justice and build peace. We will prevail. Thank you.
Merci, Docteur. Evil is usually on a very large scale, but it is best resisted by a few heroes. To quote André Gide, Le monde sera sauvé par quelques-uns. The world will be saved by just a few. And Dr. McQuigg is one of those few. Thank you for coming this evening. For those interested, there will be a reception downstairs.